Stillwater's Morning Scramble, and glad to have you here. We talked a lot about the getting to no sports thing. It's kind of like a therapy session, like I mentioned before. Don't you feel better,
Yeah,
though?
I do. I'd feel a lot better if we actually could do something about the NCAA, but
Yeah, it is frustrating.
we can complain about it at least.
Well, it makes this, without being wrong in any way. That's the best
Well,
part is we
yeah.
were right.
Yeah.
So, hey, let's dive into. You have a study session going on. I want to talk about beforehand. I know that there was an article in the news press. I don't know if it was Michelle's or not, but you're getting some numbers in, and they're kind of inspiring a little bit, I think, as far as finances with the city.
Yeah. So we had with our quarterly financial report at our last city council meeting, and talked about sort of where we are financially, and yeah, I mean it's not great. I mean this last month's sales tax collections were down close to 5%, and we expect the fall to be down in that kind of a range because of what we talked about earlier with fewer people coming in for football games and that sort of thing. But that's not catastrophic for us. I mean we're really the city from before my tenure for sure. Over the last 10, 12 years has really done a good job of being fiscally conservative, keeping money in reserve, not going out and spending every dime you have, every chance you have to spend it. So we're still in a good, strong financial position. We were able, early this year when the pandemic first started, we put a lot of capital projects on hold, just to, make sure we weren't overspending at a time where we could see large drops in revenue. And given the fact that we haven't seen those large drops, we were able to release those capital projects back to go get back on the schedule, and even add some other ones in. We also did receive our close to $3 million, around $3 million in CARES Act funding, which kind of came from the federal government through the state and then to us, and helped offset a lot of our first responder, fire, police, extra expenses that we had during the pandemic time, which also then freed up some of the other funds we had available for us to be able to put $500,000 into the chamber's small business relief program. Right. So we're administering a grant program with the chamber, of grants up to $5,000 each for small businesses, local small businesses. They have to be less than 50 employees. They have to be under a certain revenue amount. I don't have all the details right in front of me, but the idea was for local small businesses to be able to get a $5,000 grant, and depending on how that program goes, and depending on what we see as a need, we potentially could find some more money to be able to throw into it as well, and continue doing that. So it's taken us a while to get there because again that CARES money came through the state, and then we had to get it from the state, and then we've had to figure out exactly what our needs were and how we could use it.
Now the talk about it, the next plan, that if it does come about, because that's been a very contentious thing, will we get another wave here that can benefit us?
It depends. It's been going back and forth in Congress about whether there's going to be more money for states and cities in that next package. And gosh, that thing's just been a zoo. When we talked to Senator Langford was here earlier, a month or two ago, was here in Stillwater, and we sat down and talked. And this was before we had worked out our issue with American and kept American here, even without the CARES funding. But he was kind of the opinion at that time that the deal would get done. It just wouldn't get done. It would be after the end of September. It would be 1st of October or something like that. But I think we're past what he thought.
Right.
He was, anticipating them being able to get a deal done. So, yeah, I mean, it's who knows. I mean, trying to predict what Congress is going to do is not a game you want to be in. So we would expect to see it. I mean, there's certainly states and cities that are still seeing effects of this, and will continue to see effects of this into the spring, I'm sure. The airline industry, I was talking to somebody yesterday about sort of the tour bus and tourism busing industry is just as hard hit as the airline industry, but is probably not as visible to most people. So they haven't been on the list, and they're looking to try to get some money. So there's still a lot of need out there, and we'll see. But from a city perspective, one of the things we talked about is that we transfer money. So the Stillwater Utilities Authority makes more money than it needs just on the utility, right? So we charge a little bit extra for electricity here in town, and that helps fund streets and police and fire and all the other stuff we do. So we transfer generally $10-12 million or so from the utility authority into the general fund every year to help fund all the other stuff we do. But if we don't use all that money in the general fund, we give it back to the SUA so that they can put it back into reserve, or they can use it for capital improvements, that sort of thing. And this year we had a close to I think it was $5 million that we're having to transfer back over to the SUA because we didn't spend it all in the general fund. And part of that money is money we said, okay, you know what, we'll take a little bit of this out so that we can fund a couple of things that we want to fund. But so we're in a good financial position. I mean, there's been talk out there and people that go, oh, the city's, in terrible financial shape. And that's honestly just not true. We haven't seen a huge cut in revenue from the pandemic, which is a good thing. That's people shopping local. That's people supporting their local community. And even the drop we've seen, we've been able to weather. Again, for now, right? I mean,
Sure.
This fall is, we don't have tax numbers yet for September, October. We're not sure what those numbers are going to look like. They're going to be down, I'm sure. And then we don't know how long this thing's going to go. I don't think anybody out there is thinking that this all is going to disappear next week. It's not all going to disappear, at the end of the year. We're still going to be dealing with this for a while now. I mean, OSU is already talking about next semester being very similar to this semester in terms of the precautions they're taking. So there's still going to be some effects that we've got to deal with. So, so with all those caveats, the city is in good financial position.
And the meeting tonight is actually a study session, right?
It is, yeah. It's a study session where, for those who may not know, I mean, we don't do any regular business. We really just hear reports from, either staff or outside consultants if we have them on different things. Tonight we'll be talking about our utility rate studies, because we've had outside folks come in and look at the rates we charge for electricity, for trash, for all those different things, and determine, they look at what are your system costs over the next 20 years going to be, what is, in terms of maintenance, in terms of, build out and all that kind of stuff, what's the cost of power doing, what's the cost of recycling doing, all those kinds of things that they look at and let us know, here's what we think your rates should look like. So we've gotten those rate studies and we've kind of been sitting on them, and we're going to talk about those tonight to just kind of look and see, okay, what's the impact of this on a resident in Stillwater? What's the benefit for the long term?
So no action will be taken.
No action tonight.
Yeah.
This is just talking and hearing from folks and trying to get a sense of where we might go with all this stuff.
Yeah. And the fact that we're still doing pretty well is because of planning, right?
It really, really is. I mean, we talked about water a couple weeks ago at one of our meetings as well, because we would talk about the CAW pipeline and when its next maintenance is going to be and all that kind of stuff. And it really highlighted for us what 30 and 40 years ago,
Right.
Good planning on the water side has done to be able to keep us in a really great position in terms of being able to provide good, clean water to Stillwater. That applies everywhere. I mean, that applies to the power station that we built a few years back. We've got a great local power source we're talking about. We had a presentation last meeting as well from Grand River Dam on community solar and the ability that we might have to, at really no cost to us, build a local solar array so that our community, if they so choose, can have solar power, as part of their profile. So lots of good long-term stuff that we're talking about, and really trying to keep our eye 20 years down the field and not just looking at, this year is a problem and there's all kinds of crazy stuff that we've been dealing with and we've had to take up, but because we were in good shape before this, we're not having to just panic and just look right now. We're still able to keep our eyes downfield and work for the future.
Not real sexy, but this is why you got in it, right?
This is what the city council does. This
Right.
is what the city council really is supposed to do, and why you want folks who are not, I think, single issue
Right.
ideologues who, I mean, as you kind of look at the political world on a larger scale and partisan politics and all that kind of stuff, and it gets into these culture war issues and who, I mean, that none of that stuff matters at the city level. At the city level, it's, you're keeping the lights on, you're keeping the water flowing, you're keeping the streets paved, you're keeping the police and the fire departments, well equipped and trained and ready to go and respond to the things that they need to respond to, and none of that's political, none of that's idealistic. It's very practical. It's very pragmatic, and you need folks. I think we have a great council right now who is is able to focus on those things and is able to look and say, hey, maybe we don't agree about every one of these little political issues, but we're not worried about that. We're worried about how do we keep good, clean water coming to Stillwater 20 and 30 years from now. So that's what we're doing.
Meeting starts at 5:30 tonight.
5:30 tonight.
There you go. Hey, thanks for hanging out. We
Thanks,
covered a
Steve.
lot of things.
Yeah, good talk.
So there you go. There's the mayor, Will Joyce.